All right. So we would now like to introduce the next speaker, Ms. Ayesha Vera-Yu. She's just come on here. Hi. Ayesha Vera-Yu is the CEO and co-founder of ArcSolves.org, a social impact innovator that solves hunger for good and creates climate-positive communities and self-sustaining futures with farmers and fisherfolk in the developing world. Ayesha develops low-cost solutions that communities invest in, implement on their own, and enabling them to break free of systemic binds. With feedback, a community-wide vegetable exchange, families farm their food in their backyards, produce access to share with neighbors, and supply the needs of the region. In just 16 weeks, families who monocropped for decades became food secure, healthy, and had new income. Through feedback, families create additional income streams and increase savings, growing their cash flows by 20%. Most of the feedback entrepreneurs were women, 82% of them. They sell their gardens access as raw vegetables or create products like preserves and compost. ARC is scaling feedback's lasting results throughout the Philippines and beyond. Ayesha is also a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, a Ashoka Fellow, part of the Earth Company's Impact Hero Class of 2024, and selected leader for Facebook and Morgan Stanley's accelerator programs. Ayesha was a director in acquisition finance at BNP Paribas. She has an MBA from Columbia and a BA in biochemistry from Mount Holyoke. Welcome, Ayesha, and to this
Hi.
conversation and dialogue. Really excited to have you on here today.
Likewise, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be part of this. I want to thank you and Evelyn and everyone else who made this happen. I definitely think a lot, more we need to have these kinds of conversations and gatherings because I've had enough, I've had enough of it's just like, oh my gosh. I don't want to get sidetracked. I want to be focused on this. But for those who don't know me yet, I am based in New York City, even though the work is in the Philippines. And before I get into it and share, I just want to say that I'm, part of my motivation of being this call is and dialing in at 10 p.m. New York City time. Is that I have three reasons. My first motivation to being here is I want to share insights from my work with respect to the health of mothers and kids in the global South, particularly in farming and fishing communities in the Philippines, because they, along with over 500 million people around the world, especially in the developing world, struggle with hunger and malnutrition. And I want to share it with these insights with you so that together we can solve, because it's incredibly wrong, inequitable, especially since they are the very families who feed us and the rest of the world. The second reason why I'm in this call is because I want to be in sisterhood and in community with you. Natasha, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I first came to visit Singapore this April this year. And I was completely blown away and deeply humbled by the warmth and the love that was shared by complete strangers, women who I now am proud to call as friends.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with a strong mom and a really fierce grandmother. As you mentioned, I went to a women's college sorry, just give me 1 second. I went to a women's college in the US, as you shared, and and I'm part of many convening kind of circles, whether it's the WEF or Ashoka, and nowhere did I find or experience this open embrace and love by other women except in Singapore. And so I want to feel this energy and this sisterhood, and I want to give back love to that, and hold space for a shared frustration. And that frustration is, no matter how hard we work, no matter how much attention and care we give to others, whether it's our patients, our teammates, our bosses, while holding down the fort at home, it is not enough. And we are still not valued, only getting is it 60 cents to every Singaporean dollar a man gets? I mean, and on top of that, we still don't have a clear path to leadership positions. And the third reason I'm here is because I want to change the world's treatment of women around the world. And also the way we view ourselves. Because it is unfair, it's wrong, and it has a direct impact on women's and families' lives. So I may shock you, scandalize some in proposing some of the things or ideas that we have used in ARC and what we have seen in rural areas. But, you know, I hope you're open to it, because there is no way I want to wait another century. That, by the way, is the current estimate for women and mothers to get valued and to advance to leadership positions using today's policies, including the newly extended paternity leave for men in Singapore. So with that, Natasha, I know it's a Friday morning. I'm sure it's been a long week, and for both you and everyone on the call, I'm going to ask. I don't know if we can get an interaction. I want to see who's with us, Natasha.
Yeah, for sure.
To just get
Yeah, totally.
one
We can
viewer.
get everyone to like raise their hands, the
Yeah.
emoticon
Yeah,
hands
they can react.
to
can
kind of
send in
okay,
Exactly. I want to
lots
feel
of
the
raising.
love.
Got some
So
hearts
lots of
coming
love,
in.
lots of hearts going out
Yeah,
of
it's coming
all the
out.
hands are raising up. So
The
you can see that.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. I'm taking that in. You
Oh,
guys
look at
are
that.
amazing. This is like the sisterhood that I'm talking about. And that's why I'm like, yes, I will be here on this call. So first, as I promised, I want to give you some insights. Let's get the insights in the field out of the way. Food security is key to global health. In the rural areas of the Philippines and in other farming or fisherfolk communities throughout the global South, malnutrition is a big problem. In the Philippines, 1 in every 3 kids is malnourished. A majority of them are in rural areas. And the root cause of it is hunger. And yes, it's the farmers and the fisherfolk who supply us the rice, the banana, the coffee, the fish we cannot live without. They are the ones who are struggling to feed their families. And that's kind of hard to understand, right? How could a farmer who knows how to farm be hungry? And the reason why they struggle is because of a systemic bind. So in the Philippines, colonization created the practice of monocropping, where farmers rely on just one cash crop. Then, because of the Green Revolution that was pushed by the government in the 70s, almost all began using synthetic fertilizers and pesticides to farm. And this broke the inherent sustainable nature of farming. In farming, the farming was natural, where an output like manure becomes an input or compost for the plant, and where the entire ecology, including microorganisms, help produce our food. So aside from killing the nourishment in the soil, chemical farming also made it very challenging to make a profit. So I don't know if people know this, but synthetic fertilizers are byproducts of crude oil. They're traded in US dollars and the capital markets, and they have to be imported into the village. So it's expensive, and farmers have to buy these on debt at 20% interest. This increases the cost for farmers who are unable to pass this cost to buyers, because in every village in the Philippines, there's only one buyer of any crop, and they have leverage and they set the price. So as a result, farmers at most eke out $500 for every cropping, and a cropping is 4 months, right? And assuming farmers have access to irrigation, then they can maybe do 2 or 3 croppings a year, and that gets them $1,000 to $1,500 per year to provide for their family, and on average is about 4 to 5. So a farming family makes do with $3 to $4 a day. This is inadequate to feed their families, inadequate to feed their kids. And what we also learned is that even in this system already, there is also gender disparity. Because in addition to the kids' malnutrition, it is the mother who is the last one to eat. So her health becomes like the canary in the coal mine. And so when we in ARC want to track malnutrition, want to track health, we really, if we don't have enough talent, enough time, enough resources, we can just track the mother's health, and that will already give us indicators as to what's going on in a household. So what, like what Natasha said earlier, what ARC is doing is creating a path for farmers and fisher folks out of this systemic bind through our food security solution called Feedback. Feedback is a 16-week behavior change and market-focused solution. Simply, it's a vegetable exchange. It is open for the entire community to join, and it occurs once a week at every neighborhood for 10 weeks. And what inspires families to join and to, turn their idle backyards into flourishing gardens is this chance that if they bring just 3 kinds of vegetables from their backyards, in exchange, in return, they get to take home their fair share of over 20 kinds of vegetables contributed by their neighbors. And this benefit even inspires fisherfolk communities that have never farmed before to farm in their backyards. Then when they come to the exchange, what gets them hooked is the fairness, the fun, and the love. And yes, that may seem like nebulous things, but there literally are structural elements that make this sticky and that make that behavior change cemented. So fairness because every contribution is valued. In Feedback, we use a raffle structure. So with every dollar's worth of vegetables contributed, every 50 pesos in this case, or $1 worth, families get 1 raffle ticket. And this chance to win a prize, because, life is so hard. Who doesn't want to win, right? But so this chance to win a prize adds a fun element, along with the games and the dances and the singing that happens during the exchange that's organized by the leaders. And yes, it's like a weekly fiesta for 10 weeks, Lastly, it's the love. As humans, we all actually feel good when we share, and when we are in community with others. It's part of being pack animals. It's coded into our DNA. And this love is twofold, it's a give and take, right? The giving and the receiving. When we receive from our neighbors, we also feel loved and cherished. So these very simple structural elements are the final wrap, and it's what keeps families farming in their backyards and coming to the exchange and sharing with each other for 10 weeks. And so, when the total length of the program is 16 weeks, when we add the 6 weeks of, prep time where they're creating their garden, at the end of the 16-week program, families are food secure, malnutrition is gone, mothers have new vegetable ventures that increase household cash flow by 25%, and the community becomes stronger, happier, and the supplier of nourishing, organic, and affordable food for their region. Moreover, the impact is sustained. Partner leaders proudly report to us that graduated families still farm in their backyards. Our own survey reveals 98%. And that hunger and malnutrition, they report, has not returned in their village, even for those communities or villages that graduated 4 years ago. So that is the holy grail in what we all practice, right? Which is sustained impact after the end of the most minimum intervention. Now, aside from being a woman, why do I care that we all advance and hold 50% of leadership positions? Because only then will many of the global health issues and other structural issues be solved. Moreover, the impact we have on the ground can be scaled much, much faster if we have women leaders like you who understand the issues, making decision and policy. So let's first tackle the issue of valuation. Women's pay is less than that of men. And there's one main culprit to this, that we women bear the brunt of childbearing and caregiving, pressured by family, society, and sometimes, let's be honest, self-imposed, right? If caregiving is shared, our value will get closer to 1-to-1. Iceland proved this already. In 2000, the Icelandic government made it mandatory for companies to provide men with 3 months parental leave to match the 3 months already given to women. Additionally, they mandated 2 more months that can be shared between the 2 parents. This policy alone moved women's pay up from 70% to 90% of pay, 90 cents to the dollar to what the man is getting. It also resulted in divorce rates going down, reports of children being happier, and GDP going up. However, Iceland realized that that optionality of the 2 months was still taken up by the mom. The government, so appreciative of them, they wanted to reach parity in pay. So they reduced the weeks that can be transferred between parents and made the paid time off a use it or lose it scheme. And this essentially made it equal for women and men to share the caregiving. As of today, Iceland leads the world in pay equity. So now let's talk about the situation in Singapore, where yes, there are gains. I'm so, I am so just impressed and blown away by how progressive Singapore is and how it thinks for the collective and how it values families and women's advancement. And I heard the news, thanks to Natasha for bringing it to my attention, that men and fathers now have 4 weeks of parental leave.
Mm-hmm.
But this 4 weeks is still only 1/4 the time given to women and mothers who get 16 weeks. And yes, there's another structure there where there's additional weeks being optional for a father or a mother to use it. Given what we've seen in the past, given data,
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that the mothers will most likely be using this. And that part gives me pause because we already have data. We know this is going to impede the aims of Singapore to provide support for the family and to advance women in leadership roles. So personally, what I invite everyone on this call to do, every woman on this call to do, is let's not wait for policy change. Let's lead the change, starting with valuing ourselves. Let's not undercut ourselves. It's as simple as a reminder to us, to all the women in this call, that we are enough. You are enough. You are equal. Stop calling yourself and other sisters girls. We are not 8-year-old. We are women with substantial lived experience, talent, and skill sets to boot and contribute. And let's value our strengths. Our ability to listen, to empathize, and to be vulnerable are not soft skills. That's hard. These are superpowers. It enables us to glean critical insights, to connect, to gather, to build together, and solve for the collective and for peace. And, if you are wanting examples, we can look at the beginning of time. We were leading already in the hunter-gatherer era. men ventured out to hunt for food. Their success rate was 3%. Okay, 97% of the food still came from the mothers who gathered the food and still held the fort down. Genghis Khan, during his time, ceded the governing of the lands he conquered to his wives and daughters because they were better. And also before colonialism, in places like the Philippines, women held esteemed leadership roles in tribes and in societies. So it's not our first rodeo. It's not our first time to do this. Okay, so let's remind ourselves of that. Let's comp ourselves and demand our worth. Let's not wait for others to determine our value. Again, we can Google. There's enough comps out there to establish a baseline. Because if we don't do this, who will? I used to be an investment banker. And in my 11 years as a banker, I only have one regret. That regret was I left money on the table because I didn't ask for it. I didn't negotiate for it. Banks literally employ very expensive consulting firms to propose compensation schemes that is just enough to keep people in their seats and not, jump out of the window, right? They're always thinking about the company, not the individual. And the second thing that I invite us to do is let's use the data. It's there. Let's leverage it, right? Let's demand from our employers, from our elected officials, equal parental leave. Even if you're single or not a parent yet, demand it. Make it one of the filters when you use to evaluate a company that you want to join. Because there is proof that unequal parental leave leads to unequal pay. And if you are married and have a kid or about to have one, impose on your partner to take his parental leave. It's important. And the third thing is, just like what we do in ARC feedback, let's look at how it benefits the other party, right? The partners, the men in our lives. There is already much evidence that food alone is not enough for a kid's well-being. Kids need nurturing for their well-being and development. And there's also a lot of evidence, including research most recently that was shared from the University of Leeds that teased out that fathers' involvement in their kids has a direct impact to that kid's educational outcomes, especially in math. It makes sense because having two parents care for a child means there is more stimulation for the child. And lastly, once we get in the door, let's hold it open. Let's pull other women and other sisters in and have their back. We got to build this like a chain, like a fabric, like a weave. Because if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it for us. And the strong sisterhood that I saw in Singapore, I believe can be a leader in this fabric, in this chain. So with that, I wanna pause and hear more from you guys.
Well, with the reactions coming in, it seems
there's a lot of hearts.
I think you're agreeing with you.
I'll hug you back.
A lot of hearts. Okay, I mean, on hindsight, we should have just made everybody, like you can see everybody so that everybody can have that conversation with you. Because I think, I mean, yeah, it'll be nice if you can see everybody's faces. And I'm so sorry, but you can see lots of hearts, so people are listening and people are there.
Yeah, that's good. Emojis are good.
Yeah, I kind of wanted like the whole Q&A session to kind of like be a chat box too, because I realized that should be the way. Yeah. So sorry, guys. The Q&A is no longer a Q&A. It will be like a WhatsApp message. And consider everybody as part of this WhatsApp. So feel to, just message whatever it is that you want. Encouragement for one another. Just a, hey, yeah, I agree kind of thing. I think that's fine. Okay, so questions are coming in. And I'm just going to let them slowly, come in first. But Mindy just gave a question. And I'm just going to read it out. So in Singapore, regarding the pay equity among the genders, even in the public healthcare sector, our counterparts get 20% more for starting pay because of national service. So in Singapore, we do have compulsory national service for the male, so this is non-negotiable. You mentioned about leading change as individuals. So what is the one action I can take right now as a typical young individual to contribute in saying that this apparent inequality is unacceptable?
Wait, hold on. Sorry, let me catch up. There's something there that I missed. Parental leave is increasing. What, Evelyn, can you repeat? There's something that you said that I
So
missed.
yeah, so in Singapore, because the men go to national service, they do get
Mm,
some higher starting pay as part of the I would say motivation and sort of reimbursement
mm.
for that national service that they have. So it's about 2 years, 2.5 years where they go inside. And because of that, they do get a little bit sort of a higher starting pay when they go into the workforce.
Got it. Can I,
Yeah.
sorry, so I apologize. I don't have can you explain what a national service means? Is this
It's like
for like defense
like
or
basic,
military?
yeah. It's like basic
Ah.
military training that it's mandatory for Singaporean men
Mhm.
to attend at least 2 years of national service, and then year on year they continue to go on like a week or 2 weeks of reservist training every single year. So their starting pay coming into the workforce is higher, 20% higher than women. Mhm.
Got
So
it.
I'm also mindful that this is recorded. So
Yeah.
some of the answers may not necessarily be good on YouTube. So if there's any specific,
I love this. I will be mindful,
or you can
but
answer in the chat
I
group.
already like told you guys that
Yeah, I
some of
hear
the
you.
things I may say may be scandalous.
Okay, great.
So yeah, I want us to think about this. Okay, thank you for explaining that again. Now I understand it. I can understand, so from one aspect, right? I can understand the government's logic and calculus about, well, they've given, time and service to the country, and they now have more experience because we've trained them. And that's where that 20% comes in, right? It's basically their it's it is reflective of what they have contributed to the country, to society. For women, I feel like one of the things that there's two things to think about on this one. One, why is it only men? Right.
Yeah,
In
so
certain countries, women are also mandated, right? For
Mhm.
example, like Israel. And so that's one of my questions, like why was it genderized, you know? And then the second thing is, if we are to genderize it and say, well, we took the men because we have this idea that we need brute strength, right? I'm sorry, like most of wars now are fought using computers. Just FYI, I don't need strength. It's drones and fingers, right?
okay, so I mean, I don't know much about military as well, but I just wanted to say before we continue that, the military also do include women in the military, and this same sort of reimbursement is also given to women. So it's not just because they're men, therefore they get 20% higher pay, but anybody who has gone through the military and subsequently go and start work after that still has the 20%. So it may not necessarily be a gender issue.
Yeah. So that
it's
one,
more of
if
like an
they're
opportunity
given,
issue. Yeah.
exactly. If that's given for both men and women, then I don't think that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
It would be an issue if it's not given, because
Yeah,
I
or if
do
only the
follow.
men go to the army, right? And women are not
Exactly.
allowed. That one I
Exactly.
agree. But we do have a lot
So
of women
thank you
in the
for,
army. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you for that clarification, because I thought
Yeah,
only
I just
women,
wanted to-
I thought only men were like drawn. I was like, it's kind of odd.
And if
You
I'm not
know?
mistaken, like during National Day, the Red Lions and everything, there were
Yeah.
women there. Like women were also jumping off, the planes and landing and
Yeah.
being part of the Red Lion. So it's not just
Yeah.
a men's thing, it's a women thing. And I
Yeah.
do have friends who are in the military, who are fighter pilots and everything. So
Yeah.
it's not a gender. It's not, I just want to say, it's not a gender issue.
Yeah.
It's probably just a way
I
that we reimburse for that military contribution. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's fair,
Mhm.
you know, especially if because there's risk that they're taking, they're also learning new skills and they're being trained.
Mhm. I think that's
And
an interesting
somebody
point.
actually asked, do you have any thoughts of data or policies that you've seen to support single parent in career progression? Because the struggles are real. Oh, I hear you. But you know, it's really
I
about single parenthood.
when
Yeah.
I think single parenthood is like really one of the toughest things ever. Like my mom, uh, you know, I have both a mom and a dad, but my dad really, struggled with addiction. And so my mom really was my main, kind of like my main parent, so she was almost like a single parent. It is really hard. And it's one of those things where I was, really that made me be drawn to societies and nations or states that think as a collective. Because if we were in the village, for example, I mean, we're all like what, second, third generation away from a farmland, right? From the provinces. Like I'm third generation, my grandparents are farmers. If we were in the village, like there would be help, whether it's from our siblings or whether it's from our neighbors, right? But then when we're in cities, I do believe that single mothers should get more support because it's insane. In the end of the day, every child is the future of that country, is the future of that state. And so I do believe that there should be more support for those households where it's only one parent. It's hard. I have a 7-year-old, just one kid, and I have a village for him. It's me, my husband, my mom, my aunt. He has a babysitter, my sister-in-law. He has 6, and that's for one kid, right?
So, one of the questions that we actually had from our registrants, like before coming into this webinar, was a question on how do they find their niche at work, and at the same time navigate their multiple roles as a wife, mother, daughter, and also being their own person. And I suppose maybe you can share and speak to how you've navigated that journey for yourself and how you found your niche and how you navigated your roles.
Yeah. I think as women, the first thing that we have to practice again is just being selfish. Because I would guide, do you know the name? I don't know the name of that person, but I would guide that person to, in finding your niche, find your passion, find your areas of interest. I know in our society, sometimes it's hard to tone down what our parents want us to be, but or even what our friends, our partners, or what the world wants us to be, or whatever path that's been set in front of us. But I think the very first thing is really like, if you don't know yet, if you're not one of those lucky ones that have found their passion when they were young, definitely explore. You gotta just say yes to opportunities, say yes to new things, and try new things, and see where your heart sings, and what I mean by where your heart sings is when you're finding yourself reading about it till dawn and like being energized, when you're wanting to get deeper and deeper, it's something that interests you. And you got to listen to that, because when you are in the field and in a path that you love to do, you are at peace and you are secure. And that really translates to so many things. So at work, the way that translates is, you know, if you enjoy your work, you will be curious about it, you will do more for it, you will be proactive, and that will get you advanced. And then if you get advanced, you get more responsibilities, you get more pay, right? You get more visibility. You get leadership opportunities, you get management opportunities. How does that translate to your, you know, your life with your family, right? I think that now that I'm doing ARC and I really love what I'm doing, I am probably a better partner, better daughter, and better mother. You know, it doesn't quite answer the next question, which is how do you balance it all?
But
I am not, sorry, go ahead, Natasha.
I think it does kind of answer like how you navigated those roles, because what I'm hearing is that you, not necessarily that you were selfish, but you prioritized yourself and what you loved. You went after your passions, and that translated into you being a better person.
Yeah, I think all of us, right? All of us, when you think of happiness, all of us like seek, well, one, there's love, there's community. You know, when you have that, there's health, and then there's a sense of purpose, right? So if you have the three, and then you're figuring out where you are, then you got to go with what you love. And the other point to that, though, as I said, is yes, if you are doing what you love, then it, you know, it will make you will be your best self in all of the other avenues, right? Now, to the kind of like the other question of how do you balance it all? Oh, it's hard. And I think this is not an original thought from me. I'm sure you've heard it from other people. I do believe us women can do it all, but but not at the same time. And that's the key. I would say that's the key phrase, right? So there are times in, like, for example, there are times this year, right, where I literally tell my team, doesn't mean that I don't do my job, but I literally told my team, hey, you know, family is always priority, right? Like your self-care and your family, that's priority. That takes precedence over work. Because that's, in the end of the day, it's those relationships that sustain you. And those are the ones that really matter, you know, on your last breath, okay? Not work. And when you have certain important milestone events in your life that you have, I believe you have to prioritize that. I'll give you an example. You know, you're planning to have a kid, right? Or you're giving birth, or like what happened to me, losing parents, right? I wanted to be there for I lost my father 2 years ago. Lost my mother-in-law this year, and early this year, and I wanted to prioritize that time with her while she was still alive. And so it meant that I didn't travel to places that did not have her. It meant that I only traveled for work if it's really critical. It meant that, you know, there's going to be certain weeks where I'm off, right? So it doesn't mean that I don't do my job. It means there's a different prioritization depending on the season of your life. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Do it all, but not at the same time. Women can do it all, but not at the same time. I think it does.
And that there's a time and season for everything, lah. Yeah, I think that's
There's
something
a time
that I
and
learned.
season. There's a time and season for everything. But there's certain things that you must hold sacred. And you have to articulate that, right? Because if you don't articulate it, then your time will just be taken up by someone else, by something else, right? You have to hold those things sacred. Like, for example, like my I don't care what's happening in art. I don't care what's happening in the world, but from Friday noon to Sunday morning, I just tune out. I don't do work. It's like, I don't care. I'm not doing work.
Well, thank you for spending your well, I guess now it's Thursday morning for you.
It's
Any later
Thursday
would
night my time. So
Thursday night, yeah,
yeah.
Thursday night. But can we talk a little bit about like your season in ARC? So like when you are doing that kind of work in ARC, you know, like how did you even create the idea of ARC? And then how has, you know, your experiences at ARC kind of shaped your perspectives of gender equity, whether that's something that you've experienced firsthand yourself or whether that's something that you saw in the farming community in the Philippines. And Lyndon's asking this in relation to decision making for ecological issues, but also within those family communities.
Yeah. So I started ARC by way of, it goes back to like, you know, that passion. I think many of you guys will share this. Like, I'm a nerd. Okay. I love to learn every day. I love to learn something new. And every year I like to learn something new. So I believe this was like, I think I've been in banking at that point, maybe, gosh, I can't do math, 3, 6, 9 years. And this was in 2006. And I was a great banker, you know, just to give you a sense, like, and many of you guys may share this experience that you may be good at something, right? I was a VP when I was 25. I was running multi-billion-dollar deals when I was 29, cross-border, like turning it around and, you know, so I didn't leave it because I wasn't good at it. I left it because I did not want on my tombstone that she was a great banker, because it wasn't my passion, right? So in 2006, my mom, who I'm sure by now you'll know is a big influence in me, can't say no to her, asked me to buy out my cousin's share in the family farm. We have a very small farm. And prior to that request, the last time I visited the family farm, I was 4 years old. And so I told my mom, based on like what I've heard, you know, it's like, well, I'll say yes to this, but we need to make a change, right? Let's bring it back to how my grandparents farmed it, which is organic and ecological. And let's also get rid of the sharecropping structure. It doesn't work. It's a lose-lose. And so my mom said yes to that. And it was in that moment where I wanted to learn how to restructure an operation, you know, deploy the things that I learned in business school, and also learn how to operate something that, you know, in a bank, right? I'm not operating the whole bank, right? I'm responsible for a line, right? And I wanted that experience of how to learn how to operate. That's what got me into the rural areas of the Philippines. And so that was my kind of segue into ARC, because of two things. One, in the village that we, you know, that we had a farm, there was a school, a village school, and a first grade teacher found out in one of my visits that there was a New Yorker in the village, and she just kept, you know, coming to me every day, asking me to see her kids. And so, and I respect hustle. To everyone here, follow-up is 90% of getting a deal done, okay? And I was a, you know, an example of that. And it was in that situation that I saw a few things. One, you know, the wide disparity, right, of in the world, right? And where in a first grade class there were 50 kids, and you know, they didn't have school supplies. They, you know, there's a huge hole in the ceiling, and I provided a contribution, right? And there's no ATMs in the village, so I had $300, and I said, please put this towards the fixing of the roof, so that way the kids won't get sick when it rains and it floods, and you don't have to come out of pocket for the school supplies. And I said, and at this point, I was a banker, so I was jaded. I didn't know I was going to get a call back. But she did call me back a month later, and she was like, Mamie, because the parents banded together and volunteered, they the roof is fixed, and we have so much more excess funds that we were able to get school supplies, not just for 50 kids, but for 160 kids. Now, as a banker, I was like, wait, that was like a great return, right? And like, I was like, there's something here. And so we continued to engage with the school. And but that was like my first blush, right, on how you co-invest with a community, right? Where the community is invested first and they're investing their time and their skill set, and you're co-investing alongside them. And then at the end of that year, this was in 2008, they, we did a small raise, and we were going to put it in terms of school supplies and classroom builds. And there was this one really brave person, because we talked to everyone, the parents, the teachers, the village leadership council. And on the day that we were going to hand off the money, this person raised his hand and said, wait, if you are truly sincere in getting kids back to school, because you deem it to be a game-changing thing, right? For kids' outcomes and futures, putting the money in school supplies and classroom repair is not going to solve it, because that's not the root problem of why kids are dropping out of school. The root problem is hunger. And so that basically pivoted our pilot from classroom repair and school supplies to food security, and got us into solving hunger. And since, prior to feedback, our plunge is the only, until now, it's the only 5-cent self-sustaining school lunch program that parents paid into day one, and they fully funded on their own. And all of the food that the kids were eating came from parents' backyards. And so the way we did it from a behavior change is, well, if you guys farm in your backyards and bring supplies into school, that's what's going to turn on the program. And they paid for it. So, but then with the pandemic, when school being closed, it burst feedback, which leveraged on all of the learnings from the lunch. And the impact now is even wider, right? Because now we can get to kids and prevent that malnourishment at ages 0 to 5, which is the most critical it's a critical time for kids' development. So that's the reason why we're just now full on feedback. Yeah.
Now I'm gonna interrupt. I'm so sorry. I just heard some stuff which I really, really want to talk about. I think first and foremost, you mentioned about this whole concept of behavioral change, right? And it's about advocating from the level of the community and making changes that the community is able to carry on throughout the whole, once it's implemented, because it's essentially a level of the individual. And a lot of the times when we, go overseas and do all these global health work, or just involve in different communities and environments, there's always that debate, right? Like, should we get involved at the level of the community, or should we get involved in the level of policy, right? Because policy trickles down, community is at the level of on the ground, and you're working with stakeholders, individuals, but is there going to be a continuation of it? Right? Are they going to have to continue funding, the support that they need? And I struggle with that. So I struggle with that because I'm not sure what is the right way to do it. Like, it's a policy approach, like you make a change and impacts the whole ground, right? It's a big change and has buy-in from the government, buy-in from the people. Or should you go to the ground where it's really like community-based sort of intervention, but you may not know whether or not that can be self-sustained, right? Or whether or not, there'll be buy-in from the government. What do you think? What do you think is the best way?
Do you want sustained behavior change?
I mean, I would believe that the best kind of changes happens on the ground, and this is something that is, triggered by the people and something needed by the people, and there's buy-in on the ground, right? Buy-in both on the level of the ground and hopefully buy-in on the level of the policy as well, lah. But without that ground support, you're not going to get the policy.
I think that's the first step. right? Because so when I'm a believer first that the buy-in is very important, right? Policy is at the end. First, you got to test the solution to see if it works. So you gotta test it first. Test it small, test it fast, iterate, because there's going to be things that you will learn from it, right? And once, I mean, when we did feedback, the very first pilot for feedback, within 5 weeks, communities, like the village leaders would call us and say, Ayesha, it's the very first year in decades that we have no hunger in the village, right? And that to me was like, oh shit, this works, right? And then we saw, and then you have to see, okay, can we replicate it? At that time, our first wave, we had 3 communities that did it all at the same time in different places of the Philippines. And they all had the same results, right? So first you have to see, does the solution work? Second, can you replicate the result, right? And then you make tweaks, because the tweaks has to solve for sustainability. Can the solution be sustained? So for example, on our very first wave, the cost of the program is 90% more than the current cost of the program. So when the solution worked and it was replicated, right, in the first wave, I challenged our team, ARC, and say, how do we cut off 90% of the cost? Because at 10%, any village can pick up a playbook on feedback, can fund it on their own using government funds, right? So you have to iterate towards scalability, because if you can't iterate to scalability and affordability, policy is nothing. It's a waste of time. It's just lawyers writing, right? And I'll give you an example. So the Department of Interior and Local Government have a program called, oh my gosh, HAPAG. And it's basically a program that gives seeds to families to start backyard gardens. Did not work. And that's scale, that's policy, right? It came from the top. It was a national directive. We've now partnered with 101 communities. All of them have said HAPAG doesn't work, but feedback does. And the reason for that is we really try to understand the needs of the people, the pain points of the people, and what makes them happy, right? What makes it stick. So instead of giving seeds, right? Because if you think about behavior change, like even just think of ourselves, how many of us can sustain going to the gym every week, whatever that commitment is? I have learned I need a trainer.
What is the gym? Nope.
Exactly. I realize I need a trainer, right? And so when you just give seeds or a handout, right, without any support on, without thought, right? If you give seeds, the farmer who knows how to farm may not plant it, because the farmer's already thinking, well, if I plant the seeds, they're thinking about market. If I don't have a market, I'm not going to plant seeds because I need to use my day to find work to feed my family today, right? So what does ARC do? What does feedback do? We basically invite farmers and say, hey, in 5 weeks, there's going to be an exchange, a vegetable exchange. It's a pseudo market, right? You don't get cash, but what you get is if you bring 3 kinds of vegetables from your backyard, you will get over 20 kinds of vegetables to take home, right? So we understand, and this is what I was telling you guys about the power of being a woman, right? The power of listening, the power of empathy, that with those tools, understanding without any judgment what their needs are, we are then able to craft a solution that triggers them to make that change. And imagine, we've now partnered, I think 1/3 of all our partners in those 101 communities that I've told you about are fisherfolk and coastal communities. I actually think it's 40%. Many of them have never farmed before. we don't teach them how, like, we don't teach them how to design, we just basically say there's going to be an exchange, right? We would love for you to join. These are your benefits. These are the things that you're going to get. And by the way, we have some play sheets. If you want to learn how to do compost, here's the seeds that your local government and your barangay, your village council has bought for you. If you sign up, you get it. And we'll see you at the exchange, and then there's follow-up, there's impact tracking. So I'm sorry, Evelyn, but it's a very long way of saying,
No, yeah.
go first, try out
Decide later.
First listen, right?
Yeah.
Listen to the needs. And I would say second, be humble. What I mean by be humble is, oh my God, let's put a check on our hubris. We actually don't know the solution. We don't have the right solution because we're not the ones living with the problem. They are, right? They've been thinking about solutions. So let's leverage that, right? See the power to them, see the agency to them because they can do it. And third, look for the results, the replicability, and the affordability. And once you have proved that, then you go to policy.
And again, sorry, interrupting.
No, go ahead.
So, I mean, in my mind, I'm just thinking, and I don't want to make assumptions right now, right? Like, I mean, obviously, in a lot of these rural communities, the bulk of the farming, I would imagine, it might be a manual chore, and therefore maybe a lot of men are doing it. But at the same time, when you're talking about family health and growing it from your backyard, I imagine it's a lot more women, right? And I'm just wondering, like, when you get the buy-in from the community, did you get the buy-in from the men, right? I mean, again, assumptions.
Oh my
but
God, I love this conversation because we actually have data on it.
Okay, so I mean, I'm assuming that the man makes the decision on a family, deciding that the women are the ones staying at home, taking care of the kids, and now all of a sudden you want my wife to go out to her backyard and start planting all these seeds. Who's going to take care of the family? I mean, I'm just thinking to myself, like, are these the conversations that you have to get on the ground in order to get the buy-in from both the men and the women of the community to advocate for the women to take on a different role to now not only just take care of the family, but to also earn money for the family's growth? Yeah.
Okay, so in farming communities in the Philippines, and this is all of our ancestral past, okay? On the fields, I see both the men and the women, okay? They don't do the same things, right? The women plant, the men plow, right? But both activities are necessary, right? I see both women and men haul, and we're talking about 50 kilos of rice, okay? So I've seen men and women in the fields working side by side. I've seen men and women build their homes side by side. I also know of fathers who cook for their kids in farming communities. Now, so in farming communities that we partnered with, the signups are pretty much even, 50% men, 50% women. Yeah. And I hear from, like you said, like, well, who does what role? And then I hear from mothers or wives where they say, oh, I do the seeding, I do this, but my husband hauls the compost, makes the compost. The thing that differs is two places. In island communities or fisher folk communities, men are the ones traditionally that go out to fish. I have to dig deep on it, but that is the tradition. They go out at night, right, on a single boat. I barely see a woman fishing. It's mostly men. And then the women are idle. And so actually in fisherfolk communities, the village leaders come to us and say, we want to solve, with feedback, we want to solve the idleness, we want to solve the gambling, we want to solve the chismes, the gossiping. And it gets solved. We now have like data, like both at, like they share it anecdotally across many fishing communities. And what happens is even the men, Evelyn, say, they, like on one community, they came up with a jingle where they say, we fish at night and we farm during the day. So in their gardens, there is a shared role. But the other difference that we saw is the attendance in the exchange. So we know the farming in the backyard is being shared, but the attendance in the exchange is 80% women, 70% women. And I think now this is, I don't have any data to this. It's being collected by the team. I've asked, but my gut sense of this is we as women, we have more practice to gather, to be comfortable, to be in community with others, whereas men gather in very select ways, right? In the West, it's like sports, right? It's certain activities, but they don't necessarily just gather in the village to have fun, So I think it's something that possibly we have to solve more. But for now, it's not a detriment, or it's not a challenge to food security, it's not a challenge to food security. And actually the women, right? So for some of the graduated communities, we have a plus program, and the plus program is we add an entrepreneurial support program and we connect them to market. And most of the entrepreneurs are women. But the men we don't hear stories of men preventing their wives from starting out ventures on their own. Yeah. But that could just be, Evelyn, and Natasha, that could just be in the Philippines, right? I don't know if we bring feedback to another society or culture, what that would be like.
Any plans to?
Yes, absolutely. So we're being invited. Thank you for asking. To anyone here who wants to bring feedback to your part of the world, please email me, ayesha@arcsolves.org. My teammate Third is also on this call, so you can also email him. We'll put his email, vicente.morano@arcsolves.org. Some of the areas that we're being asked to look at to bring to outside of the Philippines is Indonesia, given the high malnutrition rate. So anyone who is working in Indonesia and want to bring the program there, please give us please ping us. We're also using the program for other things. So we're also being asked to customize feedback to cement peace, right? So food security is also part of getting peace in certain parts of the Philippines. And we also partner with corporations to help create a sustainable supply chain for them, because the one secret no one's talking about with food security is that there's no next generation of farmers to farm. That's really going to be the biggest issue, right? Our food costs are going to keep going up because there's not enough supply.
The whole other seminar, urbanization.
I know, that'll be a whole other seminar.
No, we should do that. Okay, next year.
Thank you so much,
Next year.
Ayesha. That is all the time that we have for your session. And I don't believe that you'll be able to join us for the panel, correct? Because it is 11 p.m.
It's gonna be midnight. Yes.
Yeah, so it's okay.
But thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Evelyn. I really, really enjoyed this time with you guys and
This was
with the
a
rest of the
fantastic
community.
conversation. Thanks so much, Ayesha.
Thank you
And
too.
we'll be
Can
in
we take a
touch.
photo together?
Yeah.
I want to do this.
I'm sure Lena's okay. Lena will just take like 2 minutes to just take a photo.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye.